emails, organize documents, and streamline communication with families. How do you teachers feel about this?
Hasn't started yet.
All right, we're starting now. Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to the Wealthy Trustee webinar. I'm super excited that you guys are here this evening. So I have a beautiful webinar planned for you guys for today. So allow me to introduce myself. My name is Christina Yvette. I am the founder of 7 Ways to Wealth. And in tonight's webinar, I'm going to teach you guys the right way to actually transfer your wealth. So a lot of us, we are very intentional about acquiring assets. We're very intentional about leaving a legacy. We're very intentional about our children receiving an inheritance, but we just don't know the steps that we need to take in order to secure that they actually receive their inheritance. So without further ado, I am going to show you what you need to do in order to create a trust. So a lot of you guys might have heard of a trust, or you may have a trust or know someone who has a trust. And so tonight what I'll do is I'll teach you the different types of trust and the steps that you need to take in order to create one, okay? So I have a short presentation for you. And after the presentation, I will open up the floor for Q&A so that I can answer any and all questions that you guys might have. So if you don't mind, just hold your questions until the end and just write down whatever questions that you have. You are definitely going to have some questions because the information that I'm going to share with you tonight, you probably never heard of this before, okay? So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. So allow me to share my screen here. And I just want to check on everyone. How is everyone doing this evening?
Good.
All right,
Great.
fantastic.
Great.
Great.
Super.
Awesome, awesome.
Good.
Okay. Nice to meet you all. Okay, awesome. Okay, so let's get started. I am going to mute everyone just so that you guys can hear me clearly and that there's no background noise, okay? All right, so let's get started. Alrighty. So once again, I am Christina Yvette. So I am young, 35 years old, mom of 3. I am a trust strategist. I have actually I became a trustee in 2015. The way that I became a trustee was by way of real estate. So I started investing in real estate when I was 25 years old. I bought my first property. And the way that that happened was I was actually a registered nurse, and I was a little frustrated because I was knee deep into the rat race, right? Where I was living paycheck to paycheck. And you guys might have heard of, like, in healthcare, there's always a shortage when you're dealing with nurses. And so I was working in one of these hospitals where there was a nursing shortage. So I was working 5 to 6 days a week, 12-hour shifts. And at that time, I had a 1-year-old baby. And I was so frustrated. I was frustrated because I wasn't taking care of my 1-year-old baby. He was being raised by my mom while I was in the hospital. And I realized I was spending more time with my coworkers than I was spending at home with my baby. So told myself, I said, I have to find another way to make money. I cannot just depend on my nursing paycheck because it requires me to, be away from home for a long period of time. And I was driving to work one day and I heard this guy, his name is Dan Merrill, and he says, do you want to learn how to flip houses? So I signed up for his seminar and I went to his 3-day seminar, and I learned so much about flipping houses that 6 months after that seminar, I bought my first property. And I bought it, and I had a mentor. And my mentor, when I bought this property, I had, created my LLC. I put the property into an LLC. And I thought that that was the right way of doing things. And my mentor is like, no, you're doing it backwards. Like this property that you have here, you need to protect it. You need to put it into a trust. And me being young, 25, didn't know anything about a trust, never heard of what a trust was. I started to do my research and he showed me exactly how to set up the trust. And so I set up the trust, I put that property into a trust because I did not want someone to be able to take that property away from me, right? I had worked so hard at this point. I was already in my career for like 3 years, and this was my way out from what I knew at that time. So I had to do what I had to do in order to protect that property. So with that being said, I have been operating within or I have been operating in trusteeship ever since. So I'm going to teach you what it looks like when you are in the space of actually operating a trust, okay? So let's continue on. So now that we know and understand, the importance of a trust, what I want to now tell you guys is what a trust is, right? Because a lot of us, we've heard the term like trust fund baby. We probably heard of celebrities having trust, but we just don't know what it is, right? And so a trust is very similar to a business, right? It's very similar to like an LLC or a corporation. It is an entity, right? And so what you need to know and understand is that you are an entity, okay? So a trust is just like you. It is a living, breathing entity, okay? So that means that if the trust is a living, breathing entity and it's seen in society just like how a human is seen in society, then that means that it can do anything and everything that you can do. So, for example, if you're able to build credit, a trust can also build credit. If you are able to buy a house, a trust can also buy a house. If you're able to open up a business, a trust can also open up a business, right? So there's no limitations to what a trust can do. Now, remember, we're saying that this is an entity. So you are operating in society with your first and last name and your social security number. The trust is also operating in society with its name and its 9-digit number as well, which is an EIN number. Okay, so it's very similar. So now that we know that this is an entity, how does this entity actually come into existence, right? So this entity is what we call a contractual entity. So it is actually a contract. So that is how you actually create the trust. You're going to create a contract, you're going to legalize that contract, and then that actually creates the legal structure that you are now going to operate as an entity, okay? So we have a contract that we need to establish, okay? In this contract, there's several different sections, but there's two that I want to point out at this moment in time. The first one is the declaration of the contract. So that is where you're declaring what you are actually establishing in this contract. Remember, there are hundreds of different types of contracts. So what is this particular contract about, right? So you're declaring, hey, in this contract, I am setting up a trust by contract, right? And I am not setting up any other type of legal structure like a corporation or LLC or a partnership or anything like that, okay? So the second component that's very important is the actual indenture, which is the agreement. So that is the agreement between the parties involved in the contract, okay? So now let's know and understand who the parties are involved in the actual contract, okay? So, when we are talking about the trust entity, right, there is a grantor, and the grantor is the creator of the trust. Another term that you might hear is trustor or settler, and they all mean the same thing. So that is the person who creates the trust with the trustee, and they donate the first asset into the trust, okay? So that is a very important position. And the next position is the trustee, okay? So the trustee is the controller of the trust. Another term for trustee that we use is fiduciary, okay? So when you're doing your research and your due diligence, know and understand what these terms mean because they are related. So that is the party that actually controls the assets that are inside of the trust. They manage the trust on a day-to-day basis. They operate the trust. They administer all of the terms and conditions, or what we call provisions, that are inside of that contract. So inside of the contract, you're going to put the terms and conditions of how you want the trust to operate, and the trustee is then going to carry out those terms and conditions, okay? So the trustee is the individual who is the representative, the legal representative, or the authorized signer of the trust, okay? Because we have this trust, which is a living, breathing entity just like you, but it can't represent itself. So it needs an individual, which is a trustee, in order to represent it, okay? And then the last party that I want you to know is the beneficiary. So the grantor is creating the trust for the benefit of someone else, and that someone else is the beneficiary. So the beneficiaries are the inheritors of the trust. They are the individuals that are ultimately going to be receiving the assets that are owned by the trust, okay? So once the trust is expired, then those assets are automatically dispersed to the beneficiaries, okay? So it's very important for them to know and understand the terms and conditions of the trust so that they can abide by those bylaws, so that they can ultimately receive the assets that are protected inside of the trust entity, okay? So let's continue on. So now that we know the three different parties involved in the contract, let's talk about some different types of trust, okay? Now, there are hundreds of different types of trust, okay? What I want to do is I want to tell you a list of different categories that every single trust falls under. So, the first category that I want to tell you guys about is express versus implied. An express trust is a written trust. So that means it is in that contract style. Okay, so it's in writing, it's in black and white, it's physical. So you print it out, you're going to sign it, right? It's something tangible that you can touch. Okay, so it actually looks like a contract. Okay. Versus an implied trust is that verbal trust that it's a verbal trust. So that means that there's a verbal agreement or contract that has transpired, and there's no physical, physical tangible paper or document associated with the implied trust, okay? So the next category that I want to share with you guys is simple versus complex. A simple trust is shorter in nature. So what we're saying here is that there's less terms and conditions, or what we call provisions. Now, with this type of trust, the trustee is required to distribute all of the money that is inside of the trust, versus a complex trust. A complex trust is longer in nature, so that means that there are more bylaws, more terms and conditions, and more provisions. And because of that, the trustee is not required to distribute all the money that's inside of the trust. So money can stay and be held in a trust with a complex trust, okay? So the next category that I want to tell you guys about is discretionary versus non-discretionary. So a discretionary trust is where the trustee has full discretion to be able to make decisions for the trust that are not inside of the contract. So for example, if inside of the contract it doesn't say anything about cryptocurrency, but the trustee feels like tomorrow is a really good day to buy some Bitcoin, then the trustee is able to do that, even though inside of the contract it doesn't say that the trustee is able to purchase Bitcoin, okay? Versus a non-discretionary trust means that the trustee is not able to carry out tasks for the trust if it's not embedded inside of the contract, okay? So there's some form of limitations with the trustee's operation, okay? So let me tell you about the next category. So the next category is statutory versus non-statutory. So a statutory trust, every single state has its own laws. Those laws are state statutes and codes. And so with a statutory trust, what we're saying is that there are state statutes and codes embedded inside of the contract. If that is the case, then that means that with a statutory trust, your trust is limited to where it can only be used in the one state where it is established, okay? And it has to be registered with the state. If it's registered with the state, then that means that it's a part of the public records and people are able to search within within that state to see the existence of the trust and what's inside of the trust. So they're able to pull up the trust indenture, okay? So the other type of trust is a non-statutory. So with a non-statutory trust, what we're saying is that there are no state statutes or codes embedded inside of that contract. So because there are no state statutes and codes, that means that your trust is not limited to only being able to be operated or used in that one state, which means that you can actually use a non-statutory trust in the entire nation and all of the U.S. territories, okay? And because it's non-statutory, that means that you're not required to register the contract with the state, which means that you can maintain the privacy of the actual trust, okay? So the last category that I want to tell you guys about is revocable versus irrevocable. When we're talking about revocable versus irrevocable, we are only referring to one party in the contract. So remember, this contract, we have the grantor, the trustee, and the beneficiary. So when we are referring to revocability and irrevocability, we're only referring to the grantor. So when it comes to a revocable trust, the grantor is usually going to serve as the grantor, the trustee, and the beneficiary. So that means that that one individual is serving all three parties, okay? So they're serving in all positions, which means that this trust is actually seen as an alter ego. It's seen as an extension of them, it's seen as them, okay? Out here in society. So usually with a revocable trust, with that type of entity, it won't operate with its own EIN. It'll operate under the Social Security of the grantor, okay? So because the grantor is also the trustee and the beneficiary, unfortunately, creditors can actually come after this trust. So your assets are not fully protected with a revocable trust. So when we're referring to revocability, what we're saying is that the grantor is able to make changes. So that means that they're able to process amendments. They're able to remove the trustees and beneficiaries. They're able to remove assets and they're able to terminate the trust, okay? So because they have so much power and control and because they're serving as the trustee and the beneficiary, your assets are not protected, which means that the only thing that a revocable trust can do is it can assist you in avoiding the probate process. And if that trust was to end up in some form of litigation, then what would happen is the judge will pierce through a revocable trust, okay? If the judge pierces through a revocable trust during some form of litigation, then that means that you as the trustee would be required to produce the trust in court. And now that would be a part of the public records. So that means that everyone can see what's inside of the trust, the contents of the trust, who the beneficiaries are, what assets you have, the net worth of the trust. So everything is exposed, okay? Versus the other type of category, which is irrevocable. So with an irrevocable trust, the grantor and the trustee and the beneficiary have to be separate individuals. They cannot be the same person, okay? So the grantor of the trust actually has irrevocability. So that means that the grantor cannot make changes or amendments. They cannot remove the trustee or the beneficiaries, and they cannot remove assets, and they are unable to terminate the trust. So the grantor has no power and no control. The trustee has all the power and all the control. With a irrevocable trust, your assets are fully protected. So the creditors that are going after the grantor and the trustee cannot come after an irrevocable trust. Now, if that trust was to end up in litigation, then a judge would not pierced through an irrevocable trust, which means that you get to maintain the privacy of the trust. So no one is going to know what's inside of the trust, the net worth, who the beneficiaries are, and what assets you have inside of the trust. Okay. So that's a beautiful thing. So now that you have heard about the different types of trust, when it comes to you actually creating your trust, the first thing you need to determine is which trust is best for you. So what type of trust do you actually want to create, right? What trust is best for you, your family, your business, and everything that you have going on in your current structure. So if you would like to create a trust that is what we call a bulletproof trust, where it's actually going to protect your assets and those assets are actually going to reach the next generation, then you want to create that bulletproof trust, and it has to fall under these 5 categories, okay? So out of all of the categories that I mentioned, it has to be express in nature, it has to be complex, it has to be discretionary, it has to be non-statutory, and it has to be irrevocable. So it has to fall under those 5 categories for it to truly be bulletproof, meaning that people, creditors, attorneys, anyone who wants to come after your trust and sue you, they are unable to penetrate through that trust, okay? So that is ultimately what the goal is. If you are intentional about protecting the assets that you currently have, okay? Or that you're going to acquire in the future. So now that you have done your research and you understand the type of the different categories that trusts fall under and the type of trust that you ultimately want to create, step 2 is for you to now begin to set up the trust. And so the first thing you want to do is you want to come up with a name for the trust, okay? So just like how you are an entity and you operate with a name, the trust is also going to have a name. And so you have to determine what that name is going to be. So there's 2 things that I want you to keep in mind. The first thing is, please do not name the trust after yourself, right? So I see that a lot of people make that mistake, right? So let's just say that their name is James Bond, right? And so what they'll do is they'll call the trust the James Bond Trust, right? And so that is a big no-no, and you do not want to do that, because one of the reasons why you're actually creating a trust is for privacy. You do not want people to know that you're associated with the trust or that you're associated with the assets that are owned by the trust, okay? So do not use a combination of your first and last name. If you want to use abbreviations, that's fine. If you want to use your last names are very common. So it's not necessarily saying that automatically you're going to be targeted as being associated with the trust because last names are so common, okay? But you do want to use a combination of different words. Like, for example, let's just say that your favorite flower is roses, right? So you can use something like Roses Estate, right? So those are 2 words that you have placed together that are now going to operate as your trust. Your trust is now called Roses Estate, okay? So the second thing I need you to be aware of is that you do not have to have the word trust in the actual name, okay? So it's very advantageous for you to not even let these creditors or other people that are looking into your trust or your assets to know that it is a trust. So you don't even have to have the word trust in the actual name, okay? They can let their minds wander and think that it is like another type of business or another type of entity, okay? So now that you have named the trust, the next thing you want to do is you want to appoint the different parties. Remember, there are several different parties in this trust. So the first one is the grantor. Remember, the grantor is the creator of the trust. Now, If you are creating an irrevocable trust, then the grantor and the trustee have to be two separate people, okay? So you intentionally want to appoint yourself as the trustee so that you are able to maintain full control over the trust and the assets that are placed inside of the trust. And then you have your beneficiaries. So your beneficiaries usually are your children or your next of kin, the individuals that you want to be able to inherit the assets that you're placing inside of the trust. So that can be an entity, or that can also be your children. And lastly is your successor trustee. So that is the individual that's going to take over after you in the event that something happens to you. Meaning that if, for example, let's just say that you become incapacitated, or you decide that you want to resign and no longer operate the trust, or if you transition and expire, then the successor trustee is going to pick up where you left off, right? So you're pretty much passing the baton to someone that you know is going to be able to continue to operate the trust for you, okay? So that's very, very, very important. And when you are appointing this person, just make sure they're at least 18 years or older, because tomorrow is not promised. So we need to already have that succession plan in place. Number 3 is for you to actually create the trust agreement. So remember, we said that a trust is a contract, okay? And so we actually have to create this contract. Now, there are several different terms and conditions that we call provisions that you want to actually place inside of your contract. One of them are spendthrift provisions. So spendthrift provisions are where you have spendthrifts, which are your beneficiaries, that they will either intentionally or unintentionally dissipate the wealth that's inside of the trust, meaning that they're going to spend the money down to zero. And so you don't want that to happen. So you want to put yourself in a position to where you can control the money from the grave. And so the way that you're going to be able to do that is through those restrictions, which are the spendthrift provisions. Some of them can be like an age restriction, where you're saying, hey, the beneficiary can't be cannot receive their full distribution until they're 25 years old. Or, hey, the beneficiary needs to have at least a college education, right? Or any type of provisions that you want to put in place in order to protect the trust, as well as protect the beneficiaries that are inside of the trust, okay? So now that you've placed all of the pertinent provisions inside of the contract and the contract is finalized, what you need to do is you need to move on to step 4, which is you actually legalizing it. So the way that you're going to do that is you're going to get the contract notarized. So there's 2 signatures that are required. One is the grantor's signature. The second one is the trustee's signature, okay? And when those 2 signatures are required, they're going to be witnessed by a notary public. That notary public is just going to sign and place their seal on those documents. Those documents then become legalized, and you are now able to start operating your trust. And so once your trust is legalized, the first thing that you want to do is you want to open up that bank account, okay? So we'll move on to step 5. So step 5 is you actually opening up your trust fund, okay? So that bank account for the trust is actually called a trust fund. That is where you're going to hold funds that belong to the trust, okay? So now what you're going to do is you are going to bring 2 things to the bank with you. Now you can create a trust fund, and you can create that type of account. So there's a few different types of accounts that you can establish: a checking account, a savings account, a money market account. You can open up a traditional brokerage account and a cash management account. That can be at a bank or a credit union or a brokerage or any financial institution that offers trust accounts. Not every single bank offers trust accounts. So what you want to do is you want to be able to provide them with 2 very important pieces of information. So the first one is the certificate of trust. The certificate of trust is proof of identity that the trust actually exists, right? Because one thing that is for sure is that your trust, let's just say that it's, 80 pages. you're not going to walk around with all 80 pages of your trust indenture. So what you're going to do is you're going to bring one page, which is a certificate of trust, which is a summary of the trust. So it has the name of the trust, the address of the trust, who the parties involved are, what the EIN number is, things of that nature, okay? So just like how you walk around with proof of identification, right? You walk around with a driver's license that has a pretty much a snapshot of you, right? It has a summary of who you are. The same thing goes for the trust. And the second piece of information is the EIN confirmation letter. So that is the 9-digit number that is issued from the IRS for banking purposes for a trust entity. So what you're going to do is you're going to provide that to the bank, and then they are going to be able to open up or establish that bank account for you. So once they open up that bank account for you, then you're going to fund the account. So you can fund it with whatever the minimum is. So some banks, their minimum is 0. Some of them is $100, some are 500, some are 1,000. It depends on the financial institution, okay? So you can go ahead and fund it with whatever dollar amount that you need, as long as it meets the minimum for you to be able to open up that trust fund account, okay? So now that you have opened up the trust fund and you have funded it with the minimum, now you are able to do the very most important step. So the most important step is for you to actually transfer the assets into the trust. This is the step that I see people miss, okay? This is the biggest mistake that people make when they are trying to open up a trust, right? So remember, you have assets, and these assets have been legally documented and recorded and registered with the county and state. And so you have to go ahead and legally transfer those assets, okay? So there's two things that you need to be aware of when you are ready to transfer assets into the trust. The first thing is that you're actually going to list the trust in you're going to list the assets in the trust schedules, okay? So inside of the trust indenture, there is a section where you're going to name all of the assets or list all of the assets. So let's just say that you have your primary residence, right? So a lot of us, our largest asset is our house, right? It is our primary residence, okay? And so when you bought this house, you received a deed to this property. Okay, so that is proof that you're the owner of the house. Okay, so as long as you have possession to that deed, what you are going to do is you're going to redeed that property to the trust. Okay, so what you would need to do is you would need to record a new deed. So we usually use quitclaim deeds, and so you'll go ahead and record a new deed, and it will be redeeded over from your primary from your name into the name of the trust, and then you would record it with the county recorder's office so that they can now go ahead and update the public records so that the public records can represent and show that the trust is now the owner of that property. So you are no longer the owner of the property. That is what you want, right? You want to be able to remove yourself from the public records, because a lot of you guys don't even know that people are able to search on the internet, right? On the county website. All they have to do is a property search. They put your first and last name and every single property that you ever owned and that you currently own in that county, they're able to see it. And so you don't want to be what we call low-hanging fruit, to be able to have yourself and your assets exposed in that manner, okay? Privacy is very important, okay? And so what you're going to do is, once again, you're going to transfer those properties legally from your personal name into the trust, okay? So it has to be in the name of the trust. And that transfer has to have been done legally in order for those assets to be protected. If they're not in the name of the trust, they are not protected, okay? All right, so let's continue on. So, what is the primary reason why you would actually want to create a trust, right? And so, number one is definitely privacy, okay? You do not want people knowing that you're associated with that house or that you own that house. They can, look through the public records and they'll be able to search and your address just comes up and they can just go knocking on your door. You don't want that, okay? The other thing is to actually protect the assets. So it's the two P's, privacy and protection, privacy and protection. Those are the reasons why you want to create a trust, okay? So what can a trust actually protect you from? It can protect you from bankruptcies, from divorce, from foreclosures, from heavy taxes, from lawsuits, and from probate, okay? So let me just give you a few examples. The first one is divorce, right? So a lot of people don't know that a divorce is a transfer of wealth, okay? It's a transfer of wealth. You have two spouses. Unfortunately, they have to go to court and they are now going to be, battling with who gets what. And so in the divorce, you have to disclose everything that's in your personal name, okay? Meaning all of the properties, your retirement account, your investment accounts, all of your bank accounts, all of your liabilities, real estate, everything, vehicles, everything, you name it, okay? So, what happens is a trust can actually protect you because sometimes one spouse will end up with everything and the other spouse will end up with nothing. Okay, I have seen it. And so you don't want to be in that situation. So let's just say that you set up a trust, right? And you have a house, a car, and $500,000 in that trust, right? So the way that the trust protects you in a divorce is because the divorce is going to include everything that's in your personal name. It cannot include nothing that is in the trust because you are not the trust and the trust is not you. You don't even have to disclose the existence of the trust or the assets that belong to the trust. Why? Because they do not belong to you. Okay. You are not the trust is not you. So let's talk about lawsuits, right? Now, a lot of us, what we need to understand is that we live in a sue-friendly country, okay? We live in the United States of America, and every single person wants to sue you. Your brother wants to sue you, your neighbor wants to sue you, your best friend wants to sue you, your coworker, your employer, everyone, right? And so a lot of us were walking around here thinking that we're not going to get sued. Do not wait until you're getting sued to protect yourself from a lawsuit, okay? Because that is the last thing that is on our mind, okay? I actually just received some information from one of my clients from 4 years ago. He just sent me paperwork of a lawsuit, okay? But he's protected. Why? Because he has a trust, okay? So you do not want to wait until you're getting sued to protect yourself from a lawsuit because it just takes one lawsuit for you to lose it all, okay? So let's just say that you are a business owner. A lot of us, we are entrepreneurs, we're business owners, right? And so let's just say that you are operating an LLC, right? What does LLC stand for? I can't hear you guys. What does LLC stand for?
Limited liability.
Limited liability.
Absolutely. You guys are on top of it. Okay. So it stands for limited liability, right? And so when we hear that term limited liability, what do you automatically think when you hear limited liability company?
The holidays.
Means it's limited. So you can be sued.
Okay, so if the company has limited liability, who do you think has another portion of that limited liability?
You do.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your participation. So that is exactly what we are talking about. So a lot of us, we are operating businesses, we're business owners, right? And so we think that because we set up an LLC, which stands for limited liability company, that that's the end all be all. When in actuality, it's not. You hear it in the actual words, right? You hear it in the title of the company, right? You hear it. Limited liability. So if the company has limited liability, then obviously you as the owner of the company, you also have limited liability. Okay, so that means that you're liable for anything that's going to happen with that business. So let's just say that you're operating your company, your LLC, and unfortunately you are the owner of that LLC on paper, right? And somebody decides that they want to sue your business. Right? If they decide that they want to sue your business, it's very easy for them to find out who the owner is. All they have to do is go down to the Secretary of State's website and do a search on your business, and all of your personal information comes up, right? Your name, your address, email, everything comes up. And so now they're able to serve your company, right? And so now let's just say that your LLC goes into this litigation and and you lose the lawsuit, right? They're like, yep, you owe this person $500,000. If that LLC doesn't have $500,000 to be able to fulfill that judgment, what do you think is going to happen?
You're gonna have to
You're
pay.
gonna have to pay it.
Okay, thank you. So what is going to happen is the judge can potentially pierce through the corporate veil. So if the judge decides to pierce through the corporate veil, that's that little tiny itty bitty piece of protection that we thought we had, right? And so if they pierce through the corporate veil, they can go after the authorized member, which is you. If they decide to go after you, then that means that what can happen is they'll go after you for everything that's in your personal name. Okay, so that means that they can garnish your bank account, they can garnish your W-2 income, right? They can garnish a lot of other financial places where you're holding money. They can also seize your assets like the house, the car, the boat, whatever it is that you have. They're able to take away everything in order to fulfill that judgment, okay? So they can literally knock on your front door where you and your children live and seize that property and liquidate it so that they can cover that $500,000 judgment. You do not want that to happen. Remember, it just takes one lawsuit for you to lose it all. And a lot of us are walking around here thinking that we're not going to get sued, being here in the United States, which is the most sue-friendly country in the entire world. So you have to protect yourself because sometimes we cannot foresee the future, okay? So do not put yourself in this position. Now, how can you actually avoid this? Well, a trust can protect you from this lawsuit. One, by you actually removing yourself as the owner of that business. So if you're operating an LLC or a corporation, you do not want to be the owner of that business. You want that business to be owned by a trust, okay? And so now that actually removes you, and it actually places a second layer of protection between you and the business, which is absolutely what you need. So please do not be the direct owner of your business. You have to have a trust own your business directly, because then what will happen is if there is a chance of a lawsuit and your LLC loses that lawsuit, then they will go after the trust. And that trust is going to act as a holding company where it doesn't have any assets that they can seize, okay? So that is how you're going to protect yourself. So if you're not structured this way, then I need your mind to start working in this direction so that you can get properly structured, okay? So let's dive right back into the presentation. The next thing that I want to talk to you guys about is that primary residence, right? So remember, we just said that your biggest investment, right, is your primary residence, your house where you live, right? So I have another question for you. This house where you live, right? It's in your personal name. If you did not wake up tomorrow, how do you think that house is going to be transferred from your personal name to your children, to your son or your daughter? How do you think that's going to happen? Come off mute, guys. Let me know.
You're probably, Full probate.
Mm-hmm. All right. So thank you. I appreciate that. So she said through probate. So let's talk about it, right? So ultimately, what is going to happen is if you have your primary residence, right, your house, and it's in your personal name, and you don't wake up tomorrow, there's no way for you to be able to transfer that property to your living children. Okay. So now you're going to leave it up to a judge. And this judge doesn't know you. This judge doesn't know your son or your daughter. But because you decided that you weren't going to get your affairs in order, you're leaving it up to a judge to be able to make the decision if if your children are going to receive your house, right? And so you do not want to do that, right? So let's talk about the probate process because I need you guys to know and understand this, okay? So what is probate, right? So probate is the process that we're going to take if we have all of these assets, right? And we transition with these assets in our name. So let's just say that you have a will. A lot of people think that a will is the end all be all, right? When in all actuality, a will is not good enough. A will is a wish list. A will is a legal instrument which is a set of instructions that's going to be carried out in the probate court. Okay. So that means that if you have a will, it's automatically going to probate. And on the will, what you're saying is, I wish my daughter will get my house. I wish my son will get my car and the cash that I have in my bank account. It is a wish list. There is no guarantee, right? So those instructions are automatically going to go to the probate court system. And once again, the judge is going to decide what happens, right? So a will is not an entity. A will cannot own anything, but a trust can, okay? So everything that's inside of a will, meaning all of those instructions and provisions, you can place that into a trust, okay? So now let's talk about this. Let's just say that you have a house, a car, $500,000 in the bank, and you did not wake up tomorrow and all you had was a will, right? Automatically, what's going to happen is because you did not set up your estate while you were living, the state where you're a resident is going to create an estate for you. They're going to establish an estate for you. So if your name is John Smith, they're going to create the John Smith estate, okay? So let's just say you're a resident of Texas. Texas is going to create the John Smith estate. And Texas is going to transfer those assets into the John Smith estate, the house, the car, and the cash. Why? Because once again, you did not get your affairs in order. Okay. So now the first thing that happens to your estate. So if you can already see a notice that you are actually going to have an estate anyways. You have to determine, do you want the state of Texas to do it? Or do you want to create an estate now while you're living? Because probate is absolutely, you cannot avoid probate, right? It's inevitable. We're all going to go through probate unless we have established our own estate. That is the only way to avoid probate is by you creating your own trust and you transferring your assets into the trust, okay? So let's get back to the scenario, right? So you now didn't have your affairs in order. So the state of Texas went and created the estate for you. They transferred all of your assets into the estate. Now the estate is going straight into the probate court system. And so the estate needs to be represented by a probate attorney. And the first thing that happens in the court system is the judge is going to go ahead and fulfill all of your liabilities, meaning that the judge is going to take care of all your debt. If you had credit card debt, student loan debt, if you had any other form of creditors, utility bills, medical bills, things of that nature, right? And so unfortunately, a lot of us, we don't think about the medical bills that we're going to rack up at the end of life, right? Let's just say at the end of life, you were sitting in the ICU for a week, right? Or you were in the nursing home. And now Medicare and Medicaid is coming after your estate. So there's a lot of factors involved here that we don't think about, right? and we don't foresee. And so it's important for us to be able to prepare for these things so that our children actually receive their inheritance, because we have, our children. And during the probate process, they're grieving. They just lost the most important person in their entire life, their entire existence, right? And so we're doing our family a disservice by having them dragged through the courts and fighting to keep mom and dad's house. Because at the end of the day, if you owe the hospital $100,000 and you don't have that in liquid cash, then what's going to happen is that judge is going to sell your house in order to pay the hospital the $100,000, in order to reimburse Medicare and Medicaid for all of those medical expenses that were covered at the end of life. You do not want that to happen, because once again, your children are going to be fighting to keep mom and dad's house. And unfortunately, they don't have the money to cover your medical bills. So unfortunately, your house ends up getting sold or auctioned off at the county steps. You don't want that to happen, okay? So once again, the probate process, it can be avoided. And the only way that you can avoid that entire probate process is by setting up your trust, right? Because once the judge decides to cover your bills, whatever is left over is what your children get. So your children are getting the leftovers. They're not getting their entire inheritance. They're not receiving the assets that you work so hard for. So what you need to do is you need to set up a trust now while you're living. You need to transfer these assets into the trust, the house, the car, the cash, right? Because now if anything happens to where you don't wake up tomorrow, your children get to grieve in peace because they avoid the entire probate process. They do not have to go to probate court. Why? Because the trust owns the house. The trust owns the bank account with $500,000. The trust owns the car, right? And you did not own any of these assets. You're the one that transitioned. The trust is still living. So what happens is your successor trustee, they pick up where you left off. They continue to operate the trust. Your children are the beneficiaries, and they continue to benefit from the trust where the assets are placed. That is what needs to happen. That is what's going to ensure that your children actually receive what is owed to them, and they get to avoid this entire probate process. And that debt that you had, the student loans, the credit cards, and the medical bills, that debt dies with you. Those creditors cannot come after your trust. Why? Because they don't even know the existence of your trust. But they can only go after things that are in your personal name. And last time I checked, you had your affairs in order and you didn't have anything in your personal name. Everything was in the name of the trust. So that debt dies with you, which is exactly what you want to occur, okay? So let's continue on. So this is the wealth building formula. This is how you're able to build wealth efficiently and effectively using a trust, okay? I have 3 pillars here. I have structure, credit, and invest, okay? So let's talk about structure. Now, everyone needs to have a trust within their structure. If you do not have a trust within your structure, you need to get restructured, okay? Everyone, when you are getting structured, what you need is to have a for-profit and a nonprofit within your structure as well, okay? So these are the 3 trusts that I recommend. It's a business trust, a family trust, and a tax-exempt nonprofit trust, okay? So let's talk about it. So the first one is the business trust. So this is for your business owners and your entrepreneurs, and you can utilize this trust in 2 different ways. The first way you can utilize it is as a holding company. The second way you can utilize it is to operate a business. So if you're utilizing it as a holding company, then it's going to be utilized the way I mentioned earlier, to where if you have an LLC or a corporation, then what's going to happen is you want to remove yourself as the owner of that LLC or corporation, right? So you're going to remove yourself as the owner, which means that you're going to process an amendment to the articles of organization. You're going to remove yourself as the owner. You're going to add the business trust now as the new owner of that LLC or corporation. And then once that amendment is processed, now the Secretary of State is going to reflect that LLC is owned by another entity, which is a business trust, okay? So that is ideally how you want to protect yourself, because at the end of the day, if you're a business owner, entrepreneur, that money that you're generating from the business needs to be able to reach your family, to provide for your family. So you have to protect that income at all costs, okay? Don't let anyone take that money away from you through, any other means. So the other way that you can actually utilize a business trust is if you don't have an LLC or corporation, then you can use the business trust. It will be fully operational to where you can offer products and services. And so you can structure it to where you can have any type of business that you want, right? It could be real estate, it could be retail, it could be anything, okay? So let's just say that you have an LLC, and now the LLC is owned by the business trust, right? So the money that is being generated from the LLC, what is going to happen now is whatever is in excess, right? You're going to do a K-1 distribution, and you're going to distribute those funds to the business trust, okay? So the money goes to the owner, all right? The owner is the business trust. So now that money goes to the business trust. So let's just say it's $100,000. So that $100,000 goes straight to the business trust. Now, one thing that I love about the business trust and the family trust is that those are for-profit entities, and the way that they're taxed is you spend the money first and you're taxed on the leftovers. I'm going to say that again. You spend the money first and you're taxed on the leftovers, which is extremely powerful, okay? So we have $100,000 that just came into the business trust, right? So you're going to spend the money first. So what that means is you have administrative expenses, you have operating expenses, you have maintenance, you have all of these things. So whatever the OPEX is, which are the operating expenses, is tax deductible. So let's just say that it costs $30,000 in order to operate the business trust. So out of the $100,000, you're going to write off $30,000 and you still have $70,000 left. So normally you would have to pay taxes on the $70,000. But because it is a trust organization that you are operating, what you can do is, instead of you paying taxes on the $70,000, you can distribute that money to the beneficiary, and then the beneficiary will have to pay taxes on the $70,000. So the way that we structure it is we'll have our family trust be the beneficiary of the business trust, okay? Why? Because the money needs to flow from the business to the family. So once again, you have $70,000 that needs to be distributed, okay? The $70,000 is going to be distributed to the family trust, and now the business has a 0% tax liability because $100,000 came in, $30,000 was deducted for operating expenses, and $70,000 was distributed to the beneficiary. So there's $0 that are left, which means there's a 0% tax liability. So we're all done with the business, and now we're going to move on to the family trust. So with the family trust, this type of trust, the way that you're going to operate it is for your personal assets, okay? So it's nothing to do with business, okay? So that means your primary residence is going to go in there, your insurance policy is going to go in there, your vehicle is going to go in there, and your children are going to be the beneficiaries, okay? So when the business trust distributes the $70,000, it is received into the family trust as income. It has to then pay taxes on the $70,000. So once again, you're going to spend the money first and you're taxed on the leftovers. So we start that cycle all over again. So we have $70,000 that came in, but what does it cost in order to operate the family trust? Well, you have groceries, you have mortgage, you have gas, you have rent, you have utilities, you have school tuition and fees, you have all these expenses, right? So whatever it costs in order to operate it, let's just say it's $60,000, then $60,000 is going to be deducted from that 70. So that's $60,000 in operating expenses. So now there's $10,000 that's left. So normally you would pay taxes on the $10,000, which is completely fine. One other thing that you can do is you can do a contribution, right? So the way to flow money around is to do distributions and contributions. So the contribution is a contribution to a charity of your choice. So that is why we are going to establish our own charitable trust, which is a tax-exempt nonprofit trust. so that we can then utilize that money for any philanthropic endeavors that we have, or any charities or any missionary works that we want to do. Okay, so that 10,000 will then be considered a charitable contribution, and it'll go straight to our tax exempt nonprofit trust, and it will be received by that trust as a donation. Okay, so now we're all done with the family trust. We have a 0% tax liability. So now let's talk about the tax exempt trust. So the tax exempt trust is what we call a 508c1a designated trust, okay? So it's automatically exempt from not having to file for a 501c3 with the IRS, because it is considered a faith-based organization and there is a separation between church and state. So any money that is coming in is going to be considered a tithe or a donation. If it's not considered income, anything over $5,000 that is categorized as income, you have to pay federal taxes on it. Anything that is a donation or a tithe, you do not have to pay federal taxes on it, okay? So that's one of the beautiful things about this organization. And you can actually save a lot of taxes. So for example, the IRS will allow you to donate up to 60% of your annual gross income to your charitable organization, okay? So that means that, let's just say that you're working, you have a W-2 income, you make $100,000 per year, right? The IRS will allow you to donate up to $60,000 to the charitable organization, and then instead of you paying taxes on the 100,000, you'll only pay taxes on 40,000 because you have donated 60,000. Okay, so with this organization, one thing that I need you to know is that you get to qualify for nonprofit grants. Okay, so let's move on to the next pillar, which is credit, which is you leveraging OPM. So you are going to put yourself in a position to where you are using other people's money, specifically the bank's money. One thing that I need you to know is that with a trust, it can build credit. So a lot of us, we are leveraging our personal credit, which is perfectly fine. But if you begin to build credit with the EIN number for the trust, then that will put you in a position to where you can qualify for higher lines of credit, like 100,000, 200,000. So you need to be able to do that, because that is going to put you in a position to where you can efficiently build that wealth, right? So you need to do what the banks are doing. The banks are actually building wealth using OPM, because when your paycheck goes straight to Wells Fargo, what do you think they're doing with the money, right? They are actually using it. Right? They're deploying it, right? They're using it to give out loans and credit cards and mortgages and student loans, things like that, right? And so if they're doing that, you also need to do the same thing, to where you're getting money from the bank and you're deploying it somewhere else, right? You need to put yourself in a position to where you are having the money make money, versus us constantly trading our time for money, right? We don't want to do that anymore. We actually want to remove ourselves from the system, because society has us thinking that we need to work for 40 hours, work for 40 years, and retire when we're 65. And that is just not the way, right? And so instead of us trading our time for money, we can put ourselves in a position to where we park our money in the right places, and the money is actually making more money for us, okay? So let's transition into the last pillar, which is invest. These are my two favorite assets that can be utilized to build wealth efficiently, okay? So the first one is an index universal life insurance policy, and the second one is real estate. So let's talk about it. So when it comes to real estate, a lot of people, they think that, when it comes to life insurance, a lot of people think that life insurance is supposed to be used when they are dead. But in all actuality, life insurance is supposed to be used when you are living. That's why it's called life insurance, and that's why it's not called death insurance, okay? So when you know and understand that, then you can know how to leverage this type of vehicle. So this life insurance, right, it is tax-free. So that means that the money that you are putting inside of your life insurance is tax-free. Okay, so you don't have to pay taxes on it, which is a beautiful thing. The next thing is that it's protected. So that means that if somebody sues you tomorrow, they cannot come after the money that you have inside of your life insurance policy. Okay, so no one can ever access or touch that money but you, which is good because that can be like, you know, a safe haven. The next thing that you need to know is that there are a lot of living benefits, right? So one of them is that with this policy, it has a death benefit associated with it, meaning that your life is insured. And if anything happens to you where you don't wake up tomorrow, then there is a certain amount of money, which is considered that death benefit, that is going to go straight to your beneficiaries. So let's just say that that death benefit is $2 million, right? So if you don't wake up tomorrow, that $2 million is going straight to your beneficiaries. And then there's another type of account, which is what we call a cash value account. So that means that the money that you are accumulating inside of your policy is called cash value. So every single time that you make a premium payment, a certain percentage is going to the life insurance carrier, and that is for the cost of insurance, right? So that is what the carrier gets. And then the other percentage is going straight into your cash value, which is going to compound and build up over time. So let's just say that your premiums are $100. $20 is going to go to the insurance company, and then $80 is going to go to your cash value. Okay. So now the beautiful thing that I like about this policy versus other policies, right? So there's a bunch of other different policies. The one that I'm explaining to you right now is called an Index Universal Life Insurance Policy, which stands for IUL. So when we see the word index, we are actually referring to an indice. The indice is a part of the stock market, okay? So you have many different indices. You have the Dow Jones, you have the NASDAQ, and you have the S&P 500. So the S&P 500, it stands for Standard & Poor's 500, which is actually tracking the top 500 companies in this country, in the United States. So what happens is the insurance carrier, instead of them actually investing your cash value or your money into the stock market, what they do is something even better. So your money is not at risk, right? So what they'll do is whatever the stock market does, they will match it. So your money is actually mirroring the stock market. So you mean to tell me that if the S&P 500 is doing 8 to 10%, then they're going to match it and they're going to give me 8 to 10% of interest in my cash value. So yes, that is the case, which is a beautiful thing, because let's just say that the stock market crashes, right? So if your money is invested directly into the stock market, then that money goes down. But because of the Index Universal Life Insurance Policy, it's actually protected. So what we mean that if the stock market crashes, your money is going to remain the same, okay? It's not going to go down at all because it's not directly inside of the stock market, okay? So that is a beautiful thing. Now, when it comes to the trust is going to be the owner of your life insurance policy. The trust is going to pay the premiums. You are going to be the insured, and the trust is going to be the beneficiary of your life insurance policy, okay? So that is super duper duper important, okay? So you want to be able to put yourself in a position to where you're paying yourself first utilizing this life insurance policy, because it can put you in a position to where you are now creating your own banking system, okay? So I'll talk about that in just a moment, but just keep that in mind. So now let's talk about real estate for just a moment, okay? So one thing that I absolutely love is real estate. So I have been a real estate investor for the last 10 years, and real estate is just so near and dear to me. And the reason being is because I come from a space where me and my family, we were squatters, right? We were living in abandoned homes. We were living in abandoned buildings. And I fell in love with real estate just being in that circumstance. And I knew that real estate was my way out, right? So once again, I was in a space where I was working as a registered nurse. Okay, so that was my career. Absolutely loved it. But it was hard. It was a very, very, very hard career. Just because of working, 12-hour shifts on your feet, doing all of this stuff, being in that corporate world. And so I told myself that I was going to give myself 10 years to get out of my career. And I was actually able to retire myself in 8 years only through real estate. Okay. So as of today, I have a 7-figure portfolio when it comes to real estate because of that solid foundation that I acquired, right? And so when it comes to real estate, what you need to know and understand is that a trust can own real estate, right? And so a trust can take out a mortgage, a trust can buy a house, a trust can get a home equity line of credit. So anything and everything dealing with real estate, a trust can do. Okay. So what you need to also know is that you can buy real estate zero down, like no money out of your own pocket. So every single property that I have ever bought in my entire 10 years has been with zero down, using other people's money, using the bank's money, right? Using credit cards. And so what you need to know and understand is that you can also leverage this too. So I'm just going to quickly break it down so that you can go and do your research after we're done with this webinar. So the first thing is one, when it comes to acquiring real estate, you want to acquire pieces of real estate to where you have one roof but multiple doors. So let's just say that you are going to purchase a triplex, right? So now that you are in the position of buying this triplex, what you need to do is there is a unique loan. It's called a DSCR loan, which stands for debt coverage ratio loan. With this loan, a trust can actually get this type of loan. It is for investment properties, right? So it's not for properties that you are going to live in yourself, okay? So these are for investment properties only. And this type of loan product, you can actually get up to 80% of the purchase price. So if the mortgage company is going to give you 80% of what it costs to buy the house, then you just need to figure out how to get the other 20%, right? So one way that you can get that down payment, the 20%, is through the credit cards and lines of credit, okay? So you want to be intentional about building business credit. It's super duper duper important, okay? Because that can put you in a position to where you have a credit card that now you have 50,000 or 100,000, right? So let's just say that you have a business credit card for 50,000. What you need to do is you need to be able to liquidate that credit card, okay? So you're going to liquidate that credit card and now you have $50,000 cash readily available, right? But before you utilize that money in order to use it for real estate, the first thing that you need to do is you need to pay yourself first. And so the way that you're going to do that is by you funneling that $50,000 line of credit, that cash, you're going to funnel it into your index universal life insurance policy. So that money is going to go straight into your policy and your cash value is going to go up by 50,000, which is exactly what you need because now you're going to be able to deploy that money. Okay, first and foremost. So that means that that money is now going to be in a position to where it's working for you, which is exactly what you want, right? You always want to park the money in a good place where it's working, okay? And so if it's working, that means that it's going out, it's working, and it's bringing back friends. It's bringing back 5 cents, 10 cents, 15 cents, a quarter, right? And so you can actually accomplish that through the Index Universal Life Insurance Policy. Why? Because Remember, you have cash value. That cash value is mirroring the S&P 500. The S&P 500 is averaging about 9%, okay? So that means that now you are able to have that 50,000 compounding for you, okay? That compounding, is actually you earning compound interest that is going to grow over time. It's going to have that snowball effect where it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, okay? Which is what you want. You want your money to double and triple and quadruple, okay? So it's vitally important that you first park that money into the life insurance policy, because now what you can do is you can deploy it to a second location. So that 50,000 is sitting inside of your life insurance policy. Your life insurance policy is a liquid asset, okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to contact the life insurance carrier and you're going to tell them that you want a loan for, you want a loan against your cash value. They're going to look at your cash value. They're going to see that you have 50,000 in there. So they're going to approve you for a loan, not of the whole 50,000, but of 49,000. So now they're going to issue you a direct deposit and they're going to put that 49,000 right back into your bank account, okay? But that 49,000 has come from their reserves, from their money, which means that your 50,000 is sitting inside of your policy in your cash value, compounding, earning interest, right? And then they have lend you their 49,000 and they put it right back into your bank account, which is a beautiful thing. So now what you're going to do is you're going to use that 49,000 as a down payment for real estate. So now you just acquired a triplex, right? So you got 3 units. And with this triplex, you purchased it zero down. Why? Because you use 80% from the DSCR and then you use 20% down payment from the line of credit that was then parked inside of the life insurance policy that was then used for the down payment. So now what has transpired.
Go ahead and put that, what ChatGPT did was put a book together and they said that you should be able to make a song.
So sorry, somebody was off of mute. Anyway, so what I was saying was that that now you have to understand that this money that you just liquidated from your credit card, you parked it in 2 places. You parked it in the life insurance policy and you parked it into real estate, okay? So now it's working for you double, okay? And so what's going to happen now is when the first of the month comes and you are getting, let's just say that you're getting rent, right? And it's $2,000 a door. So that's $6,000, right? So what's going to happen is this $6,000 that you're receiving from rent, the first thing that you're going to do is instead of you going out and covering any of your expenses, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to pay yourself first. So that rental income is going to go straight into your index universal life insurance policy. So now your cash value is going up by 6,000 every single month. And so then you're able to borrow against it, right? So they'll give you, let's just say, I don't know, 5,500. And so now that 5,500, you'll use it to pay the credit card and the mortgage, and then whatever's left over is going to be held inside of the trust as working capital, okay? So that is the position or the formula that you need to go ahead and utilize in order to build that wealth efficiently and effectively, okay? So let's continue on. So you want to put yourself in a position to where you own nothing but control everything. And I'm going to say it again because it's so vitally important. You want to put yourself in a position to where you own nothing but control everything. That is stewardship, right? And a lot of us, we want to be good stewards of our wealth, right? So we are intentional about building generational wealth. And so we need to be able to guide that wealth. We need to be able to conserve that wealth. We need to be able to preserve that wealth. We need to be able to establish a distribution system. We need to be able to establish an administration system, right? And so you do that by way of stewardship versus how you're operating now. How you're operating now is ownership, right? Not stewardship. So that means that you have bought into the lie that society has told you, which is, I am the proud owner of my house, right? And so a lot of us, we think that, right? We think that we have to be, the owner of everything. I'm the owner of the car, the bank account, the house, everything. When in actuality, that if you don't wake up tomorrow, that house is still going to be there. So in actuality, what you truly want is control over that house, right? So you want to be able to control that house while you're living. And so you can accomplish that by way of a trust, to where the trust is the owner of the property, you're the trustee, and you control the property. And then when you transition, the new trustee comes in and they continue to control the property. That is what you want. So when we're operating, we're not asking ourselves, how am I going to transfer our wealth? We're so focused on making the money. We're so focused on making the $1 million. We're so focused on buying the house, right? That we never ask ourselves, we never sit, pause, wait, and say, how am I going to transfer this money? How am I going to transfer this house, right? And so you can actually transfer your wealth through a trust. The way that you're going to do that is the trust is going to establish TCUs. TCUs stand for Trust Certificate Units. Trust Certificate Units are equivalent to stock certificates. So you know how stock certificates represent ownership in a corporation? Well, TCUs represents beneficial interest in a trust. So what you're going to do is, once you establish this trust, you're going to distribute those TCUs to your children, your next of kin, or whoever you want to inherit the assets that are inside of the trust. So for example, the trust is going to establish 100 trust certificates, which is going to represent 100% of the beneficial interest or the net worth of the trust. So let's just say I'm one of your beneficiaries and you give me 30 TCUs. That means that I have 30% of beneficial interest in the trust. Because one thing that I need you to know about a trust is that no one owns a trust. A trust is a living entity, just like how no one owns you, okay? You have individuals who control the trust, but we don't use the term ownership, okay? So we use the term beneficial interest, okay? With that being said, if I'm one of your beneficiaries, which I hope I will be, then, and you give me 30 TCUs, that means that I have 30% of beneficial interest. If you have $1 million in that trust, that means that my beneficial interest is equivalent to $300,000. Now, I don't have access to the $300,000. The trustee is the one who controls that $300,000. And if the trust is terminated tomorrow, then I will receive a check for $300,000. So that is how it works when you are in a position to where you want to take control over your legacy and your future, and you want to ensure that your beneficiaries actually receive what they're entitled to receive, okay? So the next thing that I want to talk to you guys about is preservation, because a lot of us, we do not even use that word preservation, right? We are so focused on, we're walking around here talking about, I'm building generational wealth. And my question to you is, how are you building generational wealth if you don't have the tools to build generational wealth? Do you know that there's tools that you need in order to build generational wealth? Generational wealth is not you just making money, you just having a paycheck, or you just having an investment account. That is not generational wealth. Why? Because I will tell you for sure that it will not last the second or third generation. Why do you think that we see famous families, celebrities, athletes, right, where they'll make $100 million and then it wouldn't even last the second generation? Because they didn't have the tools, okay? They did not have the tools, which is a trust and which is life insurance. Those are the two tools that you need in order to preserve the wealth that you are creating and accumulating right now. So the way that it works is you're going to establish a trust. This trust has insurance on everything. The trust has a house, it has homeowners insurance. The trust has a car, it has automobile insurance. The trust has cash in the bank, it has FDIC insurance. So the trust is also going to insure the human assets. You are a human asset. Your children are human assets within the trust organization. So the trust needs to insure you. as the trustee, the trust needs to ensure the beneficiaries. The trust also needs to ensure all of the future beneficiaries that are born into the trust organization. Why? Because if anything happens to you, the trust is actually suffering, right? This trust is going to be devastated. The trust is actually going to have a loss, and the trust needs to be able to be compensated for that loss. So the way that that happens is the trust ensures you as the trustee, and if you transition tomorrow, then that death benefit that is associated with your life insurance policy goes straight into the trust fund. And now the trust is replenished with $2 million because that's what your death benefit was. Why? Because the trust is going to be the owner of your life insurance policy. The trust is going to pay the premiums every single month. You are going to be the insured because it's your life that we're insuring, and the trust is going to be the beneficiary so that when something does happen, that money goes straight into the trust fund, which is what you ultimately want. Why? Because your trust fund is a distribution system. That is how it's going to last the third and fourth and fifth and sixth generation. That is how your lineage is going to be able to have these generational curses and chains broken indefinitely. Why? Because you're going to do the hard work right now. You're going to create the legacy right now. You're going to ensure that the wealth that you're creating today is actually preserved and conserved for many generations into the future. Okay. So we're going to establish a trust, and we're going to ensure the trustees, the beneficiaries, and the future beneficiaries. Those future beneficiaries, right, are what we call trust fund babies. So you hear the term trust fund babies. That is when a baby is born into the trust organization, right? So your beneficiaries have children. Those children are then born into the trust organization. So they're automatically going to receive trust certificate units. The trustee is automatically going to take out a life insurance policy on that baby as soon as that baby's 30 days old. And now the trustee is going to be paying into that premium, right? Paying into that policy. And so now what's happening is that trust fund baby, their life insurance policy is going to be accumulating cash value. That cash value is going to be compounding year end, year end, year end, right? So now let's just say that this trust fund baby, they grow up, right? They're now 18 years old. What happens when you're 18 years old, right? You are going away to college. You need, you're probably moving out of your parents' house. You probably need your first car, right? So let's just say that they need their first car. Normally, that trust fund baby, which is a beneficiary of the trust, they can go down to the dealership. They can get into a car loan. They can start paying $1,000 a month for a $30,000 car. Or because they are a beneficiary to a trust, they can go to the trust, right? And they can request a loan. So one of the beautiful things about a trust is that trustees and beneficiaries can receive loans from the trust, and they can also give loans to the trust. So this trust fund baby came to the trust and said, hey, I need $30,000 so I can go buy my first car cash. And so that's a beautiful thing, right? For the trust organization to be able to provide that benefit to the beneficiaries. So the trustee goes ahead and cuts out a check for $30,000 and hands it to the trust fund baby. They go and buy their car cash, right? And so now what's going to transpire is that trust fund baby, instead of them paying the dealership $1,000 a month, they'll pay the trust fund $300 a month. And so now the trust is accumulating, 1% in interest, right? But let's just say a year into the future, the trust fund baby is like, I just don't want to pay this $300 anymore, right? And so they default on that loan. What is going to transpire is that the default is okay because it was a risk-free loan. And the reason why it was a risk-free loan is because the money did not originate from the trust fund. The money actually originated from that trust fund baby's life insurance policy. So the minute that that beneficiary requested $30,000, the trustee contacted the life insurance carrier and requested a loan for $30,000. And so obviously that carrier saw that trust fund baby had well over 30,000 in their cash value. They did a direct deposit into the trust fund for the 30,000. And so that loan does not need to be paid back. So whenever you take out a loan from the life insurance company, it does not need to be paid back. The reason being is because they're automatically going to deduct that loan from the death benefit. Okay, so that is what transpired. So once that trust fund baby expires, right, and they have that $3 million death benefit, that 30,000 is going to automatically be deducted from the 3 million, and whatever's left over is what goes straight into the trust fund. And now that trust fund is replenished with, you know, with that money. So that is the position that you need to put the future generation in, right? That's what you need to put your estate in. And preservation is very important. So these are the books that I recommend. I recommend What Would the Rockefellers Do? That's a really good book that teaches you guys about the marriage between a trust and life insurance policy. The next book that I recommend is The Art of Passing the Buck, Volume 1 and 2. It teaches you about trusteeship, which is how to actually operate a trust. Then the book that I recommend is Family Wealth, which teaches you about how to actually run your family like a business, right? It's called a family office. And then the last book that I recommend is The Complete Book of Trust, which teaches you guys about the different types of trust, okay? So what you want to do is you want to take action on the information that I provided you guys with tonight. I know that it was a lot of information, but I want you to go back and do your due diligence and your research, because a trust could be your new form of doing business. Your trust could be a new form of making profit. The trust can be your new form of leaving a legacy for your family, of protecting your income and your wealth, of preserving the money that you're actually accumulating today, of ensuring that your children receive their inheritance, right? It could also help you with not only protecting those assets, but also saving on taxes so that you can deploy that money somewhere else. Imagine if you save $100,000 on taxes. Where can you put that $100,000? Right? You can put it into your life insurance policy. You can put it into real estate. You can purchase a business with it, right? So just think about those things, because what you need to do is remember the trust is your distribution system, right? It's your legacy. And so you want to treat this like a big business. You don't want to treat this like a small mom and pop shop. This is not what that is, okay? So let me show you a quick video of a trustee that actually took action on the information that I provided you guys with tonight.
Well, kudos to you all. Again, Christina, it's been a wonderful experience. I've been looking at your videos on YouTube for a while, and there are a number of people offering trust these days, and I guess that's the big thing. Don't own anything, control everything. That kind of, I didn't say it correctly, but that is the sentiment. And so it seems like the playing field is being leveled now from the rich and people who weren't privy to this information. So thank you for being such a great asset to a community that didn't have this information. And you made it so simple. Thank you for the recordings. Thank you for the step-by-step instructions. Things that we can go back and look at. So we do appreciate you. And thank you, Mondo. That was a great explanation of infinite banking. I know a number of people are talking about that, but they make it so complex. And his presentation was nice and succinct and very informative. So this has been an overall great experience. I definitely will recommend you to others.
All right, so let's work together, you guys. I do have a program teaching you step by step on how to actually create the 3 trusts that I had mentioned in this webinar. So that's the business trust, the family trust, and the nonprofit tax exempt trust. So your first option is where you can do it yourself. And this is independent learning, where we have an online course. With the online course, it comes with 43 video modules where you'll go ahead and watch the video training. You'll download the trust templates. I'll show you what a trust template looks like in just a couple minutes. And so you get lifetime access to this. So once you watch the trainings, you'll set up the trust. And then you are able to learn the ins and outs of how to operate it, how to transfer your assets, how to open up bank accounts, how to move money around, things of that nature. You also get all the resources that you're going to need to fully operate your trust. Like if you need to file taxes, if you need to transfer your house or your car or life insurance policies, you have all of those resources readily available inside of the program. And then you also have ebooks, which are the books that I previously mentioned in the slide before this one. So we also do have a private Facebook community where you're able to engage with other like-minded individuals who are trustees, who have been trustees for years now, and who are fully operational where they have their houses and businesses in trust. And you also will have access to them via our Telegram chat, where you're able to chat with them on a daily basis. And some of these individuals are in the same city, a state, county where you're located. So our online course, as I mentioned, you do have lifetime access to it. And so it's only $997. The second option is where we're able to do it in a workshop style setting. So it's done with you, where just like how we're on Zoom right now, we will go ahead and come together on Zoom calls. So you get 5 Zoom calls. It's done in a group setting. It's Monday through Friday. The time is 11 in the morning to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, okay? And in the workshop on Mondays, what happens is we'll set up the business trust together. So I will show you step by step. I'm going to break down every single paragraph of the trust. So for example, our business trust is over 50 pages. So I break down all 50 pages so that you can understand what's inside of the trust. Trust me when I tell you, you're not going to be able to operate a trust if you don't know what's inside of it. You have to understand those terms and conditions and provisions, okay, the bylaws. So I break it down so that you can easily understand it. And so Monday, as I mentioned, we're going to set up the business trust together. And then on Tuesday, So after we set up the business trust, then we dive into Q&A so I can answer any and all questions that you might have. On Tuesday, we set up the family trust together. So that's for all of your personal assets. So after we break down all of the information and I show you step by step how to set it up, then we dive into Q&A. On Wednesday, I show you how to set up the tax exempt nonprofit trust, and then we dive into Q&A. On Thursday, I show you how to get your EINs with the IRS, and then I give you a list of banks so that you can go open up a bank account for the trust. So we go over banking procedures and operations, and then I show you how to have a board meeting. We fill out promissory notes so that you can be able to document how much you're going to fund the trust with. And then one of our educators are going to come in and teach you about business credit and business funding so that you can leverage OPM, so that you can get the money that you need for your trust organization so that you can invest in insurance policies, invest in real estate, invest in businesses, okay? So then on Friday is the very last day of the workshop. So on Friday, we focus on asset protection. So first we do an inventory of our assets so that we can know which assets we have and what assets qualify to stay in the trust and which assets don't qualify to be in the trust. And then after that, I show you how to place your property or real estate in the trust. So I show you how to deed it over from your personal name into the trust and how to record that deed with the county recorder's office. And then I show you about the vehicles. So you learn how to execute that bill of sale so that you can submit it to the DMV. And then I show you how to put your businesses into the business trust so that you can do that business purchase agreement and amendments with the articles of organization so you can update the Secretary of State. And lastly, one of our educators comes in, and this is our CPA. He comes in and he teaches you guys step by step on how to properly file taxes and fill out the 1041s for the trust and answers any and all tax questions that you guys might have. So with that being said, the workshop is a really good environment to be in because you actually get to learn a lot because there's other people that's on the call that are asking really good questions in those Q&A sessions. to information that you didn't know that you wanted to know. So that's definitely the place to be. And then we hold you accountable. So it's us holding your hand through the entire process so that you can have that reassurance to know that you are actually setting up your trust the right way and in a timely manner. So we get everything done in 1 week. The workshop is only $2,500. So we're actually running a workshop this week. So Thursday and Friday, we have 2 more days left of the workshop. And then our next workshop is going to be December 1st to the 5th. So that's going to be our last workshop for the year. Lastly, and the workshop is only $2,500. So the last option is done for you, which is for our individuals who are not tech savvy. They do not want to set up their trust independently or by themselves. And they probably have multiple businesses and assets, and their structure is a little bit complicated. So my team and I will be able to assist you with setting everything up, with applying for your EIN, and with transferring all of your assets. So you get individualized support and a lot of customization dealing with your specific structure. So the private sessions are $7,500. So those are your 3 options if you are intentional about building that legacy. And so what you can do is you can go to our website, which is wealthytrustee.com, and there you're able to enroll. And let's see here. There you're able to enroll. So what I want to do is I want to show you guys what the actual course looks like and what the what a trust looks like. So this is, hold on, excuse me 1 second. Let me get back here. All right, so this is an example of what a trust looks like. So once you receive these templates, everything that you see in red is what you're going to be customizing. And all of these sections and provisions is what I break down so that you can have a better understanding of the contents that are inside of the trust, okay? This is an example, excuse me. This is what our actual program looks like. So this is the Wealthy Trustee program. So once you enroll, you get online access to the course. As I mentioned, it has 43 video modules. So you're going to go through the induction, and then after that, you'll start with trust entities so that you can learn the ins and outs of what a trust is. You learn about the different parties involved, like the grantors, trustees, beneficiaries, successors, protectors, the benefits and the different types of trust. Then you learn how to set up the nonprofit trust. You learn how to set up the family trust, and you learn how to set up the business trust. So we break down every single paragraph. You learn how to apply for your EINs, and then you learn different tax strategies so that you can operate with your nonprofits and your for-profits, and you can understand what distributable net income is and tax exempt status. And then you learn about asset protection. So you take an inventory of the asset, and you learn how to open up your bank accounts, brokerage accounts, and how to transfer a majority of your assets, and how to have board meetings for your organization, because it's very important for you to be able to properly document everything that's happening with your legacy, with your estate. Then we dive into wealth creation, where you learn about the OPM and building business credit. You learn how to invest in the stock market so that you can park that money in places where it'll grow. And you learn about the infinite banking system with the life insurance policies. Then we go into wealth preservation, where you learn about the legacy crest, and then you have your resources and your ebooks available, okay? So with that being said, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and open up the floor for Q&A. So if you guys have any questions based off of the information that I provided tonight, I would love to be able to answer any and all of your questions. Does anybody have a question? All right, so Amanda has a question. Amanda, what's your question? Let me see. Are you putting it in the chat or are you coming off of mute? So let me see. Can a whole life policy work like an IUL? So they're very similar. A whole life policy is actually a really good policy. The difference between a whole life and an IUL is that the whole life you are earning dividends, and you're earning a guaranteed amount of interest or a return. So usually it's like 3.5, 4%, something that is guaranteed and it's lower, but it's secured versus an index universal life. So with the index universal life, because it is mirroring the market, your return is interest and not dividends, and it fluctuates because the market fluctuates. So you have the potential and opportunity to earn more with an IUL. So it just depends on that, but both policies are still really good policies where you actually get to accumulate cash value. So I'm not saying that one policy is better than the other. So you're still good with both policies.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
So I'm already 64 and I have 8 grandchildren. And would I be able to actually get a policy for both of them? Or 2 out of the 8, I'm sorry, the youngest ones, to add into our family trust? Or how would that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yes, you can, if your grandchildren are beneficiaries of the family trust, then you can take out policies on them.
Okay. Could they also be my successor if they're 18 and older? Or no?
Yeah, yes, they can. So a beneficiary can be a successor if they're 18 years or older.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Welcome. So someone in the chat asked, how do I transfer my assets to the trust as the trustee without running into any legal trouble? So anyone can transfer assets into the trust. It doesn't only have to be the grantor. So the grantor is going to place the initial asset, which is what we call the initial consideration or the initial corpus. And after that, anyone, meaning the trustees or anyone, your mom, your grandpa, your sibling, anyone can add assets into the trust. So it doesn't only have to be the trustee, it literally can be anyone. So Amanda is saying, if both you and your spouse own the property, how do you transfer? So both signatures are going to be required. So if 2 people own the piece of real estate, then both people have to sign that deed over into the trust. It can't be done with just one person. So that was an excellent question. How do you have a business? Wait, do you have to have a business to do this? No, you do not. So a business is definitely not required. A business is an asset. And so some people who have businesses want to protect that asset, but a business is not required. You even having assets is not required. So you want to set up that solid foundation initially now so that you can put yourself in a position to either open up a business or to acquire assets if you don't have them. The next one is, can you have both? Yes. So you can have both policies. You can have an IUL policy. You can also have an index universal life insurance policy. So you can have multiple policies if that's what you want. And having both policies versus one or the other is great. So, and you can have them even be owned by different trusts. Alan has a question. Alan, you're on mute. Do you have a
Hey, sorry
question?
about that. Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you. Hey, how you doing, Coach?
Great. How are you?
Doing excellent, excellent. Got a question. So for the nonprofit or the ministerial tax exempt trust, um, do you position those to own so we can put assets in those, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, would you put a an operating company? Would that particular company own other subsidiaries as far as nonprofit businesses, such as like, you got you like a Salvation Army or you got you like a Goodwill or something like that? Would that be considered that, or would that be considered would you put that under a business trust?
If it's a for-profit entity, it's best to go under a business trust versus the nonprofit. But if it is a nonprofit, then yes, it can go under the charitable trust.
Okay. Okay. Um, okay. I think that's it. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you. All right, let's see. Can you get a trademark on the trust name? Absolutely. And let's see here. The next question is to borrow against the whole life policy, like you explained with the IUL. Yeah. So you can borrow against the whole life policy, which is good. So typically you can borrow against a whole life policy quicker than you would be able to with an IUL, depending on the carrier. So some carriers let you do it, like within the first month, and some require you to wait a year. So choosing the right carrier is definitely important. So once the deed is complete, do I inform any tax officials to tax the trust name or to get notified once the deed is recorded? When it comes to you recording the deed, you're going to do it with the county, so you don't have to report it to the IRS. Because what you're going to be doing is you're going to be structuring it as a gift and not a sale. What process for putting assets into the LLC? So what is the process of putting assets into an LLC or a trust? Um, well, that's a very different process. So I'll just talk about the trust. So when you're putting assets into a trust, you're going to list it on the schedule of the actual trust indenture, and then you're going to do the second component, which is legally transferring the asset. So if it is an LLC, then you're going to do an amendment to the articles of organization so that it is documented with the Secretary of State that the LLC is owned by the trust. If it is a piece of property, then you're going to record a new deed for that real estate with the county where the property is located. Can your spouse be the grantor? It is not ideal for your spouse to be the grantor because they're going to be locked out of the trust. So ideally, if you're married, you want you and your spouse to be co-trustees so that you guys are able to operate the trust together. All right, let's see what else we have. Are there restrictions around transferring real estate to a trust if someone has a foreclosure proceeding? So absolutely, if you are actively in foreclosure, then if you attempt to place that property into a trust, it is going to be considered an illegal transfer. So that's why I am adamant about telling you to protect the property before things like this happen, because then you're not able to protect the property in the middle of a litigation or a foreclosure. So this would have had to happen prior to the proceedings. How do you set up a trust for intellectual, financial, non-residential property? So these assets like intellectual property, so those are assets. You can definitely list them in the schedule, and then you can execute a a personal property affidavit and add it to your trust documents so that you can document that the intellectual property belongs to the trust. Can the successor trustee and the beneficiary at the same time, my parents would have to be the initial trustee. So yes, you can be the successor trustee and the beneficiary, and your parents can be the acting trustees. So yes, and a trustee can be a beneficiary, they just cannot be the sole beneficiary. So once you become the trustee, you have to determine if you want to remain as a beneficiary and ensure that there are others. And you guys, the links are inside of the chat. Okay, so if you guys are interested in enrolling into the program, what my team and I have decided to do was to run our Black Friday sale a week early. So from today all the way until Black Friday, you guys can enjoy 50% off using the code Black Friday 50. So the code is inside of the chat. The website is also inside of the chat. Another thing that you can do is if you are unable to enroll into the program now, but you want to secure that 50% off Black Friday discount, then you can put a deposit down. So the deposit is only $200 and it will keep your spot. And then after that, you can enroll into a payment plan. So we do also have payment plan options available. So you can also see that on our website. So the website is wealthytrustee.com. And we do have a replay for tonight. So if you guys want to be able to watch this information again, we will go ahead and put the replay inside of the chat as well. Diana has a question. It says, would you put the real estate for the nonprofit under the nonprofit or separate? So the real estate, if it belongs to the nonprofit and if it's used for nonprofit use, then yes, put it in the tax exempt nonprofit organization. If it is your primary residence, then you put it into the family trust. Can the business trust be a parent for the nonprofit trust? So, it typically doesn't work that way. The way that it is designed is the nonprofit trust will have another entity like the business trust be the beneficiary of it. Is there a specific whole life carrier that you would recommend? That's a really good question. So if you're interested in finding out more about the life insurance policies, please click the link that's inside of the chat so that my team and I can reach out and give you the information that you need regarding the life insurance policies. Can you go straight to a trust instead of an LLC? Absolutely. An LLC is not required, so you do not have to have an LLC in order to establish that business trust. Should we do an LLC and a trust, and which one is better for crypto? So for crypto, you always want everything to be private. So it is better for the trust to own crypto. So you can have your brokerage account, so something similar to Coinbase, where your brokerage account is in the name of the trust. And then if you have cold wallets or ledger wallets, then you can place those two ledger wallets into the trust, and then you can hold your crypto that way. So crypto is definitely best with the trust. And as far as which one is better regarding an LLC or a trust, what you need to understand is that an LLC is public. So it is statutory, which means that the state regulates your LLC and has full control and can shut down your LLC at any point in time, versus a trust is private, which means that a trust, for example, it can exist for well into 100 years, versus an LLC expires every single year. So with the trust, it is, once again, it is private. So you have more power and control, and it's not regulated by the state. So they don't have, the power and control to be able to shut you down. The next question is you set up individual trust for, I think I answered that. Let's see here. Yep, so the replay is available. If you guys have any questions, then you guys can send us an email at info@sevenwaystowealth.com, and then you can also call our number. So we have a toll-free number. It's 833-660-1071. The next question is, do you register your business trust with a state? No, you do not have to register your business trust with the state. The next question is, if you do have a distribution for TCUs to the beneficiaries, and you have 4 beneficiaries at 50% each, can you distribute what you have, which is 30% distribution for each beneficiary? So whatever amount of TCUs that you have available, you can distribute it to the number of beneficiaries that you have available. So ideally, you want to go ahead and distribute whole units when it comes to the trust certificates. What tax implications come with transferring your crypto to the trust? So it depends on the brokerage, but typically you're just transferring the ownership. You're not selling the crypto, so it doesn't trigger a taxable event. We just purchased your do-it-yourself program. We just purchased the program on Monday. So please send us an email to info@sevenwaystowealth. Any other questions?
Can you repeat the phone number?
Yeah, so it is 833-660-1071.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You're welcome. Thank you guys to everyone who is on the call tonight. I appreciate you guys staying on. I know it's late, it's already 9 o'clock. So all I want to tell you guys is to take action on the information that I provided tonight, because once again, this can change the trajectory of your family. Everyone who's on the call, you guys are generational curse breakers. I know that for sure, because I am a generational curse breaker, and I only talk to individuals that I know that 100% are generational curse breakers. So you're changing the trajectory of your family to where now your children are being raised. They're being raised as beneficiaries and trained as trustees, because they are going to take over after you, right? They can't inherit your 9 to 5, but what they can inherit is their position within your legacy, within your estate. So God bless everyone. I hope to see you guys in the workshop, and I hope that you guys have a highly favored rest of your week. Bye-bye. Good night. Thank you for being here.